On this episode of Empowered Returns, I'm joined by Charlesgate Managing Partner Mike DeMilla as we talk about the pricing playbook for maximizing property revenue in condo projects. Let's dig in. Hello, hello.
How are you, Tori? What's going on?
Another episode of Empowered Returns. This is
Oh, is that why we're here? What?
my podcast now. I'm having the best time hosting with you. We just finished an episode with Todd, which is sure to be a conversation starter. But I am so excited that it's just back to the two of us for this episode. I feel like the last few recordings we've had together have been so entertaining to listen to, and we've got a good topic on the books today.
Well, we certainly hope so. And yeah, for sure. No, I think it's a great topic today and a super timely one for us as we've been talking about this a little bit in terms of on the condo development side, how we advise developers and other clients on pricing. And so I'm really excited to dive into this for sure. So appreciate the opportunity to have a deep dive conversation on the art and science of condo development pricing.
Yeah, it reminds me of that song Money Talks. Like, this is a money talk. That's what this episode is. So let's dig in.
Are we going to have that kind of going in the background at this point? The Money Talks?
Yeah, such a good song. Oh my gosh. Anyways, let's start with, a really just setting expectations question. I feel like condo pricing right now, especially, is like a tightrope and one misstep. And it feels like projects are just in free fall. We've seen it like left and right. Why is pricing for condos so hard to get right now? And I guess an even better question, and I've been exploring this with like worst enemy recommendations, is like, Mike, what could possibly go wrong with condo pricing?
Pricing for condominium development unit sales is an art and a science. I think what happens oftentimes is people and advisors and market guidance and developers get caught going either too far in one direction or too far in the other direction, instead of blending what's important about both. And so I think you've got, especially on the small side, you've got developers relying on, residential brokers who maybe are used to selling one or two homes, not realizing that there is a real art and science to pricing condos within a building. So part of it is market factors, outside external factors, but part of it is the internal factors in the building. And how do you set the prices from unit to unit? Because that's where there's a real important thought process that goes into that from unit to unit. You can't just price the units all the same. That tends to lead to bad results. So even the ones that are the same size and same type, like 2 bedrooms or whatever. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum. Then the other end of the spectrum is that you've got spreadsheet junkies that come along, as I sometimes say, that are just like everything's on a spreadsheet, and you you don't take into account the psychology of the buyers in it. So it's like, we know the market's at $942 a square foot. This one's a little bit better on the square foot. It's within one standard deviation of the pricing. We want to be in the top, 90% of pricing in the market. So we're going to price it at $1,017 per square foot. And that's the pricing. And the higher levels go up about 2%, whatever, per floor. Okay. So that doesn't take into any account all the other factors that are important and how to properly vary the unit prices within the context of a development project, so that you're creating things like scarcity of certain types of units, so that you're creating urgency for buyers who walk in the door. So there's all these factors that can come into play, but just those are kind of illustrations that are, it's important to consider the art and the science of it, and consider those things conjointly. So again, and it's not just about the market, but it's really about the psychology of buyers to create that momentum of sales to sell through from beginning to end of a project to maximize your sellout.
Totally. I didn't even think of that, building the scarcity. I love scarcity marketing, but like building that into the pricing of a project that doesn't exist yet and having the foresight with a partner, or if you are choosing to do it yourself, that's a tall order, especially if somebody's not like a trained marketer, if they haven't been around the block doing dozens and dozens of condo sellout projects. So very good point. So what is the biggest pitfall, myth, pricing mistake you've seen in your lived experience, Mike, that you see developers making in condo projects, and why does this cost so much?
Look, I think I can take this into two parts too. I think on the small side, sort of small to mid-market condos, so sort of call it, 50 units or under type projects, or, certainly on the 20s and the 30s especially. We see basically the problem is you're pricing everything so close together that you basically just create too much confusion in the mind of buyers and too much chaos to like how to make a choice. You're not limiting their choices in an appropriate way that will help, again, create that little bit of scarcity, that little bit of urgency to make a decision, and sort of appropriately how to build psychology and marketing into your pricing process. And so we see that oftentimes, and how that manifests is that you'll see a big stall in the middle of the project. You might get a few units off the bat, and then you kind of get this stall that comes out, and it just extends and delays the time to sell out the full project. So that's one mistake. The second mistake, which happens on both small and big projects, is you're pricing everything too high from the start, right? So you have to price things in a way that's going to build momentum with the plan to increase prices over the course of the sellout of the project. And you can do that with a phasing methodology or other price increase methods. But if you're not able to build that momentum from the start, give those early prospects and buyers a reason to buy early, it's just going to cause a far extended, first of all, a slow start, which extends the entire sellout process across the board. So those are really the two biggest mistakes. And again, it just comes down to not being thoughtful enough going to market. Because occasionally I've heard like, oh, why don't we just put the prices high at the beginning and we'll see if people buy it and then we can lower it from there. It's like, well, that just oftentimes backfires because people have the perception that the projects might be on the market, just hasn't been absorbed. So it just removes that sense of urgency for people making a decision, right? So those are the two biggest things that we've seen in sort of major mistakes for condo pricing.
Totally. And I know it's the rhythm of the business and it happens, but me being a first-time home buyer, nothing gives me cold feet more than when I see an asset has had its price slashed like more than twice. And I'm, putting a bid on it, expecting to go into a bidding war with the way the market is right now in Annapolis, that if you're priced way too high out of the gate, like what does that look like to the average consumer who's buying that condo wondering, I wonder why it's been dropping $10,000 like every 3 months for the last 6 months and it's still vacant. Like,
yeah, so it's a little bit different though on new developments, right? That is a perfect example of the single family or single condo side of things, right? So whereas on most now this is another mistake, by the way, where you're just releasing all the prices at once and quote unquote listing all the units all at once at a price, and then you do see those price reductions. But if you have any semblance of experience in the condo development world and selling, large scale, even small and medium scale, but certainly large-scale projects, not all units are going to be released at once. You're not going to list public pricing for every unit out of the gate. That makes no sense and very much backfires. So you don't necessarily see like the price reductions like that as you would in a single unit. That said, buyers and brokers in the market do know how long a property's generally been marketed for, and you just are not, and you're not getting that early momentum when you get someone walking in out the gate soon after the project launches, and you can tell them you're 20%, 30% pre-sold. That's a really powerful tool to accelerate and appreciate prices more towards the middle and end of the project than you would by arbitrarily choosing too high prices to begin with.
My next question for you, we just talked at length about numbers and we're starting to touch on the people side of the condo transaction. And how does psychology play into setting the pricing for a condo?
Two things. First, to set kind of the base, right, of where a project sits in the context of the market. So, obviously you're looking at comps in the market, you're looking at the, price points in the market overall, how this project competes with other comparative projects within the market, things like that, right? And then, okay, so you kind of got your price bracketing for the project, but then here's where the real art comes in as far as how do you price the units within a project, right? Depending on the various factors, whether it's, there's so many tangible and intangible factors, whether it's, the floor that they're on, if upper floor versus lower floor, if it's on a corner unit, if it's next to a mechanical or elevator room, if there are sort of quirks in the architecture of the building. Sometimes, for example, in that case, might have a historic rehab project with a modern section above, and there might be differences in the quirks and layouts of the units. Ceiling height, is there a balcony, patio, or outdoor space attached to the unit? How much parking comes with each unit? Obviously, those are the more tangible sides of things. But is there upgraded finishes for for a unit. Which direction is a unit facing? What's the sunlight? Is it has sunset exposure, sunrise exposure? Which parts of the unit does that fall into? Is the layout efficient or not? You have units that might be the same square footage, but have lots of hallways and are chopped up versus ones that are sort of more open and more desirable floor plans with bedrooms set apart from one another, for example. So there's all these factors that really come into play to say, okay, this is how we're going to take the units and vary the pricing amongst the units such that we're reducing the appearance of the overall supply for any individual buyer and sort of maximizing the units that have the best qualities overall and minimizing the sort of the discount, quote unquote, that you have to take for some of these maybe units with defects or less desirable characteristics, whether tangible or intangible. So these all come into play. And then the other factor to consider, or that is important as well, is like where prices are from an absolute standpoint for different unit types. So like, you could have a super large one bed, for example, but at some point in most markets, there's just going to be an absolute upper limit that someone's willing to pay for a one bed. So no matter what you do, that's not going to work. So hopefully you can, hopefully we've had conversations in the design development phase and you can rework floor plans in some of those cases. But there are absolute limits to various things that you've got to account for. And maybe again, if you start thinking about these things earlier in the process, you can at least mitigate that with an upgraded finish package or throw in some extra amenities, access or parking or whatever else might come into play, so that you can mitigate some of this. These potential objections that come into play from buyers who walk into the building and would not otherwise be willing to pay, some sort of way far above premium market for a certain unit type.
Oh my gosh, just hearing you talk about that, Mike, is giving me war flashbacks to a unit I sold once. It was a penthouse right next to the elevator vestibule. And I know way too much about dampeners now and the decibels that a Kone elevator makes. And, had the developer and I sat down and talked about that floor plan and said, hey, like nobody's going to want to pay penthouse premium supreme deluxe pricing to hear the elevator go up and down like every 30 seconds. I'm looking back, like that was a really tricky situation. It involved a lot of concessions and a lot of incentives to try to mitigate. So it's definitely important to get it right like early on to make those considerations. It's better for the site team. It's better for the sales team. It's better for the resident who's going to be talking about living in your product. So moving on, how do you know if your asking prices are too high out of the gate? And most importantly, how do you know if they're too low in condo?
Look, I think in both cases you're either not getting the conversions you would expect from the tours or the prospective buyers that walk in, and alternatively you're getting too many conversions. Now, again, it's all about strategy too, though. So you may launch with call it more prices that should attract demand and momentum early, and that can make sense in a lot of cases, and so you want that. But then that's why you do this phased pricing release schedule type of strategy, and there's a few different specific ways to do that in various cases, whether you hold back units or whether you do a blanket price increase across the board, or there's various mechanisms to do depending on the project, the market, and the prospective buyers and how that might work best. But ultimately that's like the right type of strategy to be thinking about, is how you're building momentum for full sell-through and maximizing your overall sellout through the end of the process. Starting too high is, very obvious. You're just not getting anyone that bites. I mean, if you're not getting anyone that bites off the bat, your prices are almost automatically too high. It just is, or your marketing is just that bad. You're not driving enough demand. There's not enough awareness about the project, or some combination of both. And so, again, but this happens all the time too. You've got so many, occasionally a project hits the market and it's the hottest thing in town and it sells like hotcakes and doesn't need a lot of marketing. Like if you build it, they will come. Actually happens. Not very often. It's very rare. But if you got this pristine location, the right type of product to just deliver, and sometimes it works out great. The other 99% of the time, most developments, that doesn't work. So you've got to come in and be thinking about what is your real pricing strategy, and not going in off the bat trying to maximize your profit on your first 10, 20, 30, 40% of the building. That's a surefire way to actually lose more money than you might win on the overall context and scope of the full sellout. Mm-hmm. So just you got to react fast, though. Ultimately, it's not. This is what I I say all the time, from a marketing and a sales perspective, development is not a set it and forget it exercise. You don't just create marketing once and forget about it. You don't just set pricing once and forget about it. You've got to iterate. You've got to get the feedback from the market, get feedback direct from the people walking in the door. Who's the best people to hear from about whether your pricing's too high or whether you're attracting the right audience or whether people are resonating with the look, feel, brand, amenities, layouts of the building? Ask the people who are walking in the door, right? So you have to take that feedback and convert that into the appropriate mechanisms, whether that's pricing adjustments or whether that's marketing adjustments, whether that's sales process adjustments, so that you can go forward and capture the right kind of demand, attract the right audience who wants to live in that building, in that location, and pay the prices that you need to attain to make it a successful sellout. And that can all be done. It just is a matter of critical thinking, listening to feedback, and adjusting and adapting on the fly.
That reminds me of working in DC, where there's no shortage of new development condos, new construction cranes going up. And I remember driving home at night when it would get dark out and you could see the new projects, and they were having, it was post CO, like what lights were turning on. And there was always a few projects that had that sought afterness to them that just felt like they really got it right. And like, looking back as their peer in real estate, I would be enamored with, okay, what does their website look like? What does their collateral look like? What is their pricing? What is their messaging? What is their, activation? What was their pre-sale office set up like? And trying to get that nugget of, what do they have that we don't have? Because when you see a brand new building that's like almost all the way lit up on your commute home and you're just like scratching your head, like there's, especially in competitive markets on the East Coast, it's like there's so many good examples, but there's also a lot of empty buildings where the first floor is lit up and maybe some of the corner units up top. And those decisions probably have a lot to do with what you just said: pricing not getting reallocated, marketing not getting recalibrated.
Yeah. Look, I mean, that's absolutely right. I've seen it time and time again. And look, it's often driven by inexperienced, brokers or real estate agents who are for the first time or have limited experience in how to sort of price a condo project. It's treated like it's a single family or small or, small property from a marketing, branding, pricing perspective. And it just goes backwards in a real hurry. You're absolutely, at best case, you're leaving money on the table. Worst case, you're losing a lot of money as a developer on those types of projects. And so, you need kind of someone with experience, with a track record that can do it, that's done it, that's seen what happens both in the good markets and the tough markets. And look, that's why we've developed. I mean, it's not like we're we've got some magic ball that can predict prices, but what we have is experience and critical thinking, and we've developed tools. Like we've developed pricing tools that build in all these factors that I talked about earlier in this conversation so that we can analyze pricing from a market perspective and also within the building perspective and price units with a strategy that makes the most sense. And so these are critical tools that also have to be aligned with how you're doing marketing and how you're aligning your sales effort, your pricing efforts with the positioning, branding, and demand creation marketing that you're putting out to the market in an aligned way to make this all go really, really well. And so, that's often lost in translation. Whether it's a small project and you have someone inexperienced, or even on larger projects when there's oftentimes just a complete disconnect from the sales effort and the marketing effort. I see that so many times as well. You've got, a marketing team or a developer who hires an agency that has literally no connection to the sales team, and it's just a complete, cluster F. I know, Tori, you don't like me to swear on this podcast, so I'm gonna censor myself here. But
LinkedIn analytics are my responsibility, so you can swear, but then you can't be like, "Why did nobody see this video?"
I don't know. I see lots of beeps and bleeps on other ones. Just bleep it, God.
You can put in like a cat scratch, like cartoon voice. Swear all you want, Mike. You've got that.
But those are the things I see all the time, and these mistakes are made for various reasons, and they're a little bit different usually on smaller and mid-sized projects as they are from large super high end or luxe projects as well. But really, it's important to we've collected and distilled the experience and the wisdom of all of our projects over the years and how to properly think about pricing strategy from the beginning. That's why I was so excited to talk about this when you thought about it would be a good topic to talk about. It's like we've built these tools, we from our experience and from our track record, and we've delivered them to the market in the way that really works. But it's not it's hard because it's an art and a science, and it requires experience. It requires market data and analysis and the facts and the macroeconomic factors. Those are all super important, but you're going to get lost very quickly if you just rely on that. And if you go way on the other side, it's a lot of just guesswork and like single family pricing. Oh, we'll price it high and we can lower it later and it's going to be fine or whatever. No, that's what causes all these problems and all these these condominium for sale projects that stall out so many times in the middle of the sales effort and just take longer and longer and longer to sell. You just kill momentum. You have set it and forget it marketing that never changes. Everyone's bored. The pricing is all wrong at that point. It's not adjusted. There's so many things that go wrong that just are often not fixed, that the same problems continue to exacerbate. And so it's sad to see sometimes.
Totally. And I think just for our listeners at home, something that I've come across doing some research and writing for Charlesgate and Authentic is it's not always the condo that has the helicopter pad and the car elevator that are going to sell out the fastest. It's, the properties that won the race to align their sales and marketing, to have intelligent pricing setups, to have cohesion across the entire process. Those are the properties that sell out in record time. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, totally. Look, for me, it always comes down to the right strategy, the right alignment with marketing and sales, right? We talk about all the time. Build a brand that matters, create a real demand engine, enable the sales team to analyze and adapt what's happening boots on the ground so that it's not a set it and forget it situation. And if you're doing that and creating the overall strategy there from pricing to sales process, that's how you're going to, and it doesn't matter what market you're in. It doesn't matter what the price point is. It doesn't matter. There's some tweaks and intricacies to each, but that framework works for any size project in any market. And it's a way that we can, that we've developed. It's our sort of unique way of going to market with condo projects that has driven some incredible success. And that's why I love talking about it so much. It's just a little bit more thoughtfulness, a little bit more critical thinking, a little bit of experience thrown in the mix that we've been able to develop, the program and the platform that we can deliver amazing results for our clients. And it's an exciting thing to see and to, be scaling it the way we are.
Yeah. I write the press releases, so I'll have to link those in the comments, but it's been awesome to see the growth and especially the testimonials you've gotten back from your clients. So one more question. You talk a lot in the earlier parts of this call about spreadsheet junkies. We know developers love their Excel. They love their Google Sheets, but gut instinct.
Some do, right? I mean, I don't want to diminish, right? I use that term kind of cheekily sometimes, and it's a funny term because too many, asset managers and developers and financiers are often, stuck in spreadsheets rather than like understanding what's happening on the ground, how to operate, how to sell, how to lease most effectively. And the smart ones that are great at that side of it hire the operators, the salespeople, the marketers to do a great job. And that's where the team really can, real estate development is the ultimate team sport. Mm-hmm. And that's where all these pieces together, by hiring the right team, bringing the right collection of experts into the mix, can make projects so successful. So, but it's funny, but sometimes, many players in the industry can just rely on getting trapped in pro forma land and spreadsheet land, that it causes problems.
Totally. And it also causes, I think, a delay in recognizing the warning signs of things not going well. It's like, well, no, like, trust the data, trust the spreadsheet. Like, the spreadsheet's like, the data's right. I trust the data. And then you're delaying decisions to recalibrate. You're delaying decisions to adjust. And that can cause a whole nother slew of problems we could talk about in a different episode. But I think...
I love to talk about, because data is great, right? Data is awesome. Information is awesome. But we live in a world right now where there's such a clutter of information, of news, of data. And so what many have lost, I think, is this idea to say, okay, but what does it mean? Yep. What does it matter to what's happening on site? And I think that's where we often bring a unique perspective to help take what's the most important data, analyze and understand the market data, analyze and understand what's happening from demand, analyze and understand what the feedback from the people walking through the door are, then put all those pieces together to make the right decisions and the right guidance going forward so that we can drive the best results. And that's where a critical, again, it's hard. It's so hard these days. There's so much information, so much noise, so much, flood the zone of information in all aspects of our life that's a really challenging thing in any industry, but especially in real estate and real estate development.
Absolutely. I think you've got to balance like the data and the spreadsheets with like the heart and soul of a project. And, when people do make a purchase decision to buy a condo, they're not, I mean, maybe they're thinking about data technically, but like they're falling in love with the view. They're feeling that sense of home that you can't always plan for in the pro forma, unfortunately.
Well, yes and no. I mean, but you kind of can though. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like you sort of can. You sort of have a theory going in. You have a strategy going in. You sort of know or should be thinking about which units drive that type of response from buyers, and that's where the strategy really comes in. And ultimately, yes, there's a lot of psychology. You're trying to create a buying atmosphere for the right audience who walks in the door, and pricing does matter to that. The right pricing for the right units and the variation of pricing of units within a building can help create that feeling, that emotional, attachment, more so than you would if it's just a sort of a thoughtless exercise and the pricing isn't as well thought out or isn't as well planned with that art and science together.
I feel like I just learned so much. I'm ready to price my own condo project. So this was a
Nice.
really great conversation, Mike. Seriously.
Awesome. Glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully the audience loves it as well. And as I like to say, I'm happy to show our pricing tool to anyone out there listening and help them see how it might come into play for their project. So anyone, feel free to DM me, hit me up on LinkedIn or email me, and I'm happy to connect on projects.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for your time, Mike. And until next time.
All right, Tori. Good to talk to you. See you soon. Bye.